If you've spent any time in this hobby, you'll know of the trinity of 3 nasty colors that nobody ever wants to paint. They're simply just black, white, and yellow. I've always wondered why they're so hard to paint. I need to be honest about something. This might sound weird. I've never really thought about myself as an artist. I know when you paint miniatures to a high level, it's art. I talk to people and it's art, but to me, for some reason, I just can't see it as art. I might not be good enough as a painter. I don't know what it is, but I've never really seen myself as an artist. So it felt really weird researching this topic because I've gotten really in-depth and started watching a lot of other artists' content. And when I say artists, I mean traditional art stuff that I never really thought about to use for miniature painting, but does apply because we are painters. This led me to watching content creators like A Brush with Becca. I think it's Becca. I've probably butchered your name. I'm sorry. It made me think about the core components in paint. You should definitely check her channel out. It was fascinating to learn art history, but it got me to really think about paint and how it works. Growing up, you're always taught that black is the absence of color and white is all the colors together. Well, that's true for physics, but we're not talking about physics here. We're talking about pigmentation. And when we're talking about pigmentation, white is kind of the absence of color. Black is kind of all the colors together, which that's why those two colors are difficult to paint. One is the absence of color, one is all the colors together, making it hard to read. And the reason why yellow is so hard to paint, it has the weakest pigment. Armed with this new knowledge, I decided to strike out on trying to create 2 different schemes for 2 different styles of painting yellow. One takes inspiration from the old red era of Warhammer and is super bright and vibrant and punches you in the mouth. The other one is more of a grimdark style, kind of a modern style, that's going to be a bit more desaturated of a yellow, but I think also looks really nice. It might be a tad easier to achieve for a beginner. Both painting schemes I've tried to make as user-friendly as possible. First, we're going to be starting out with a vibrant scheme. To understand this, we're going to have to take another step back and look at color. Yellow is a very hard color to achieve, as previously stated, and it's also a primary color, which means it's very hard to make shadows with it. So what we're going to do is use 2 colors to create shadows. Now, you've passed the 3rd grade, you probably know red and yellow make orange, and that's a good shadow for a yellow. So if you wanted to use red as your base coat,
look at it. It's not pink. It's like a lightish red. Guess what? They already have a color for lightish red. You know what it's called? Pink.
Using pink as my base coat is going to help us create shadows. I feel like I didn't need to get this on camera. I used white through the rattle can over the pink. This is going to give me both my highlights and my shadows. Get that shit out of here.
Noah! Wait, that's illegal.
Tamiya panel liner. This is essentially the same thing as an oil wash, but already pre-made and more user-friendly. I specifically used the brown version of it. I applied this on all the recesses of the miniature, doing a recess shade before I apply anything else. This is so I get all my layers of shading before I apply my yellow. You might be confused that I'm applying the yellow last. Trust me, I have a very good reason. That's because I'm going to be using the new Imperial Fist contrast paint. Now, you can use an ink for this, but I find contrast paints are a bit more user-friendly and allow you to just slather it all on and you're going to get a great result. Because what we've done is essentially done all the pre-work and then we're just tinting all those other layers. We're going to use it more like a filter. After you let it dry, this is the outcome, and it's an amazing result. Now that we move to the second style, we're going to throw away all those fancy techniques and going to stick to bare-bone basics. By this point, you already know we're going to have another chat about colors.
What are you planning for today?
Same shit, different day.
Now, if you've been painting yellow for a bit, or even just tried it, you're gonna know if you start from black, you're going to get this weird green tint. If you know why, please feel free to share in the comments, because I just, frankly, I don't know. Can't figure it out. I'm an imbecile. So we're gonna start with red again. Kind of. So we're gonna use brown, but brown has red in it, and it has quite a few other colors in it. But we're gonna be using a reddish brown on this guy, and that's where we're gonna start. Sort of a chocolate red brown. You can really use any brown you want for this. Citadel has some good browns. After that, I'm going to go through several phases of dry brushing with Avalon Sunset, and applied it about 2 different times through the dry brush. And as I started dry brushing, I slowly started mixing white into my dry brushing until I felt like it was a good highlight. For me, this is 2 more layers of dry brushing, but you could push this effect even further. And really, that will give you a really good base to the armor using Avalon Sunset. And it's pretty simple to get this effect. Now, it's going to look a bit more desaturated, but I feel like for more of a grimdark style or a beginner, this is going to turn out fabulous. Now, if you allow me, I'm going to get personal for a second.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
I don't really like the Imperial Fist. Oftentimes, because of the writers, I find them boring. But one of my friends, who is a writing nerd, recently has moved away from where I live, so we no longer see each other, and he doesn't really have his army, and his favorite army is the Imperial Fists. Ultramarines are a much better choice, but hey, he likes what he likes. So I decided, instead of stripping the miniatures I have here, I would just gift them to him as the start of a small kill team. I know nothing about kill team, to be quite frankly honest, but at least I know with 40k, you kinda need a leader for your miniatures. This gave me a perfect opportunity to highlight to all of you guys what can be achieved by just pushing these methods a bit further. Again, first I primed the miniature black, and then I decided to actually start from a purple, which might sound weird, but pink and purple are very close together, so I decided to move through purples to create my shadows into a pink up until white. Using this simple technique that anybody can do through a rattle can, I was able to create a uniform look through the whole kill team. After that, I just simply applied the contrast paint on them again, and then started doing the normal paint by numbers, filling in the details. I normally like Imperial Fists with black, and black has really good coverage. But the character I was making for my friend, who's his favorite character, comes from the Third Company, sadly. So I had to put up with painting with red, which was a bit tricky because my red didn't really want to flow right. I originally tried to use a contrast paint, but some of the contrast paint was left open, so it was all dried up. Then I tried to use Mephiston red, and it really was too thin. That was because I was using a wet palette. Now, I made a mistake here. I purchased Mephiston Air Color, and I used it on a wet palette, which made it really too thin. Now, I did also use another technique here. Instead of using white as a highlight, because that's the brightest color I can use on these guys since they're so bloody bright, I decided to do the opposite and use a black. But using a black, just edge highlighting is going to look off. I decided to use a modeling technique that I found from the model train community, and that's sponge chipping. So essentially all I do is I rip a piece of sponge using my tweezers, and then I'm going to go along most of the edges that are going to be significant, and then I tap my sponge against it to create the illusion of chipping happening where the paint was. The other thing I did to beef up this technique is I took silver paint went in along the same edges, sponging again and sponged along them. So it looked like not only the paint was being gone, but the armor was starting to be chipped. So the armor kind of started to look like it was being chipped. Of course, I had to put an Iron Warrior's head on one of the bases, and then I picked up this new basic kit. After that, I applied grass tufts, and don't be afraid to use these things. I know the official paint jobs only put 1 or 2 on the miniature. Personally, I have found, especially since doing the World War II project, applying a lot of them will give you a different look than applying a few of them. If you want patchy grass, applying a lot of them is a lot better than only applying 1 or 2. I always have found that even if you have a really bad paint job, if you have a halfway decent base, your miniature is just immediately elevated. Which means if you have a really good paint job and then a halfway decent paint, it's really good, and so on and so forth. You be the judge of how good my paint job was. But I can tell you for sure that I did pretty good with the basic. Finally, with a black rim job done, these guys are finished.
Which has determined your fate. I've never seen so clear. I feel the end and it's near. The day of reckoning's here. The sound of deafening